At 3:15 on the morning of June 22, 1941, the silence along the Soviet frontier ended without warning. German artillery opened fire. Bombers crossed the border. Soldiers climbed into assault boats. Tanks started their engines, and bridges were seized before many Soviet commanders understood that a war had begun. Hitler expected the Soviet Union to collapse within months. Instead, he had just opened the largest and most destructive land war in history. Less than 2 years earlier, Germany and the Soviet Union had signed a non-aggression pact. Together, they had divided Poland and avoided fighting each other while Hitler conquered Western Europe. But the agreement was never meant to last. Hitler had long viewed the Soviet Union as both an ideological enemy and a source of territory, food, oil, and raw materials. Once France fell in June 1940, he believed Germany was free to turn east. On December 18, 1940, Hitler signed Directive Number 21. The invasion was given the code name Operation Barbarossa. Its objective was not simply to capture land. German planners intended to destroy the Red Army west of Russia's interior before it could withdraw, reorganize, and continue the war. They expected another rapid campaign, similar to the victories in Poland and France. The invading force was divided into 3 great formations. Army Group North would advance through the Baltic states toward Leningrad. Army Group Center, with the strongest concentration of armored forces, would strike through Belarus towards Smolensk and Moscow. Army Group South would move into Ukraine, where much of the Soviet Union's agriculture, industry, and natural resources were located. More than 3 million German soldiers, supported by hundreds of thousands of Allied troops, stood ready along a front stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The preparations were enormous, but they were not invisible. Soviet intelligence received repeated warnings. Britain supplied information. Border commanders reported German troop movements. Soviet agents gave possible invasion dates, and German deserters crossed the frontier with last-minute warnings. Stalin knew that war with Germany was possible. What he refused to believe was that Hitler would begin it while Britain remained undefeated. Stalin feared that any Soviet mobilization might give Germany an excuse to attack. Units near the frontier were ordered to avoid provocations. Aircraft remained crowded on exposed airfields. Ammunition was often stored separately from weapons. Shortly after midnight on June 22nd, Soviet commanders finally received an order to place their forces on combat alert. But the message moved slowly through a confused communication system. Many formations never received it before German shells began falling. The Luftwaffe struck Soviet airfields, headquarters, railways, and communication centers. Bombs fell from the Baltic region to Ukraine. More than 1,000 Soviet aircraft were destroyed during the first day, many before they could leave the ground. Telephone lines were cut. Radio networks failed. Some Soviet pilots fought back, but entire air units disappeared within hours. Germany quickly gained control of the skies above the main invasion routes. On the ground, German armored spearheads pushed through the frontier defenses. Infantry crossed the Bug and Niemen rivers, while engineers repaired captured bridges behind them. Army Group Center drove into Belarus, where its panzer groups began moving around Soviet formations rather than attacking them directly. The purpose was to penetrate deep into the rear, cut roads and railways, and trap entire armies inside vast encirclements. The Soviet response varied from place to place. Some units collapsed under the first bombardment. Others resisted with extraordinary determination. At Brest Fortress, isolated Soviet defenders continued fighting, even after German forces had passed far beyond them. Elsewhere, Soviet tanks launched local counterattacks, but often without air cover, fuel, reliable maps, or clear orders. Courage could delay the Germans. It could not repair a command system already breaking apart. In Moscow, the first reports were incomplete and contradictory. Stalin initially struggled to accept that the attack had been authorized by Hitler himself. The Soviet government did not hear Stalin's voice that day. Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov addressed the population instead, announcing that Germany had attacked without declaring war and calling on the country to resist. Stalin would remain publicly silent until July 3rd. That evening, Soviet headquarters ordered major counteroffensives toward enemy territory. On paper, the Red Army still possessed enormous strength. In reality, commanders often did not know where their divisions were, which roads remained open, or how far the German spearheads had advanced. Some formations attacked in the wrong direction. Others moved directly into ambushes. Orders created in Moscow could not keep pace with a front changing by the hour. For the German High Command, June 22nd appeared to confirm every assumption behind Barbarossa. Surprise had been achieved. Soviet aircraft burned on their airfields. Armored columns were advancing, and prisoners were already moving west. Yet the first day also concealed the central weakness of Hitler's plan. The Soviet state had been stunned, but it had not collapsed. Its territory was vast, its reserves were deeper than German intelligence believed, and its soldiers continued fighting even when surrounded. This was also more than a conventional military campaign. Nazi Germany had planned a war of conquest and annihilation. Behind the advancing armies came SS killing units tasked with murdering Jews, communist officials, and others marked as enemies. German occupation policy was designed to seize food for the Reich, even if millions of Soviet civilians starved. The violence that followed was not an accidental consequence of the invasion. It was built into the plan from the beginning. By nightfall, Britain had promised support to the Soviet Union. Hitler had gained territory, but he had also created the coalition he hoped to avoid. Germany was now fighting Britain in the west, and the Soviet Union in the east. Every German victory would carry its armies farther from their supply bases and deeper into a country that had not surrendered. In the following weeks, the Wehrmacht would capture hundreds of thousands of prisoners and advance hundreds of miles. But Soviet resistance would harden at Smolensk, Leningrad, Ukraine, and finally before Moscow. In December, the Red Army would counterattack outside the capital. Barbarossa would fail to achieve the quick victory on which Germany's entire strategy depended. June 22, 1941, began as one of Hitler's greatest military successes. It ended as the first day of his most dangerous gamble. The road from the frontier would eventually pass through Moscow, Stalingrad, Kursk, and Berlin. Germany had invaded believing that the Soviet Union could be destroyed in a single campaign. Instead, it had entered a war it could not finish, and one that would ultimately destroy the Third Reich.